Smriti-Purananam Alayam Karunalayam Namami Bhagavatpadam Shankaram Lokashankaram Shankaram Shankaracharyam Keshavam Badarayanam Sutrabhashakritau Vande Bhagavantau Punah Punaha Ishvaro Gururatmeti Murti Bheda Vibhagine Vyomavatyaptadehaya Dakshinamurtaye Namaha Gukarastva Andakaro Vai Rukarastva Nivartakaha Andakara Nirodhitvat Gururitya Vidhiyate Sadashiva Samarambham Shankaracharya Madhyamam Asmadacharya Paryantam Vande Guru Paramparam Om Sahana Vavatu Sahanau Bhunaktu Sahaviryankaravavahai Tejasvinavadhitamastu ma vidvisha vahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Namah Shri Shankarananda Guru Padam Bhujanmane Savilasa Mahamoha Graha Grasaika Karmane. So we begin our second class of the 15th chapter, which is called Vishayananda in Brahmananda. So in all 5 chapters, there is a dual title. So one is the Brahmananda, and the other one is the particular aspect of Brahmananda. So Vishayananda also is also an aspect of Brahmananda alone. The light of the Vishayananda, the light of happiness through objects, which is very common to us. This is what our life is all about, is also nothing but a part of the Brahmananda. This is being shown. And so Vishayananda, just to quickly revise the context of the five chapters, is where the prarabdha is not anukula. So prarabdha is normal but not anukula. Anukula means one which is not extraordinarily favorable to us. It is not favorable to us. Life is a struggle. You have to go through all kinds of experiences all your life before you can begin to appreciate the very source of the happiness, which is Brahmananda. In the other 4 chapters, they were easier. You had progressed more in your life, and so the path forward, the sadhanas, the methodology, all was slightly different. Here, in setting the context, it is that what if my life is really full of problems? How can I direct my thinking towards what the truth is being talked about, which is that my own nature is Brahmananda? How can I do that? So this is what we are doing. So there, we said that we saw the first verse, and there one of the key words used in the first verse is Dwarabhutam. So Vishayananda is a Dwarabhutam. Dwarabhutam means it is actually, looked at it properly, it is a door towards understanding Brahmananda. If you look at the Vishayananda as a method of, if you look at it that way, as a method to understand Atmananda, then it becomes very useful. So instead of simply enjoying individual experiences and so on and just be done with it, this is what we do. We have a pleasant experience and we say, oh, that was nice, that was wonderful. That's good, done. What's next? Do we start searching for the next pleasant experience? So this is what we go through our whole life. So just like the distinction between karma and karma yoga in the Bhagavad Gita, here also the Vishayananda can simply be series of isolated experiences, or they can become a dwarabhutam. They can become a door to understand the reality of my own ananda, which I am unable to appreciate because I am so involved in enjoying the Vishayas of the world that I don't really think about, I don't connect the dots. I think that would be a good way to do it. I don't connect the dots. I just look at them as individual dots. And we saw a very important way of doing that, as you recall, in the end of the last class, which is going to be the topic of our classes on Saturday mornings, which is that if you look at your experiences, but you look at it from the standpoint of connecting the dots, who am I that is enjoying or suffering for that matter? What is the connection between the various experiences? What is the binding factor for the experiences? If I start to draw my attention towards that line of thinking, then I will get somewhere. Then I will get freedom from the Vishayas. And we saw in the example that I took from Swami Akhandananda Ji's teachings, that if you examine that I am a limited person, because we take it for granted that I am a limited person, and I am very busy in trying to minimize my limitations, because any sukham, any ananda releases the binding towards me, because I am really looking for some pleasant experiences, and when I am involved in the pleasant experiences, then I don't have this feeling that I am a wanting person, which was the favorite expression of Swami Dayanand Ji. Don't be a wanting person all the time. Observe when you are not a wanting person. And why is it that you are not a wanting person at some other time? Examine that. And so in the conclusion that I am a limited person, which is what I am involved in all my life, not only the basic conclusion that I am a limited person, but I am very involved in what aspect of limitation I have. Every experience that I have reinforces my conclusion that I am indeed a very limited person. So there we saw that the advice given is, no, don't just take the conclusion that I'm a limited person. Examine and think about who is observing the conclusion that I'm a limited person. Who is it? Is that itself another limited person? And there Vedanta gives a very beautiful and a way of looking at it, that if you think that I'm a limited person, and I am now, because you cannot conclude that I'm a limited person until you have something that concludes that I am a limited person. I'm observing that I'm a limited person. You can even ask somebody, if you say, how do you know you're a limited person? So he says, of course I know it. Don't you also know it? So I know that I am someone other than a limited person conclusion to make that conclusion. So now the question is, who is that person who is observing that I'm a limited person? Is that another limited person? And if that is the case, then how does that person know that I'm a limited person? Is there another one? So this one says it's ad infinitum. You can keep on thinking limited. Who is the observer of the limited person? Who is the observer of the limited person? Keep going. You'll go nowhere. So there it is said that the conclusion, that your observation that I'm a limited person is by an unlimited person. And if you want to argue, let's argue. And this is what is done in the Purva Paksha Siddhanta, that this kind of an argument is given. How do you know that I'm an unlimited person? This is a very important thing, a very funny thing, that I don't need to know that I am a limited person. I don't need to know that I'm an unlimited person. Unlimitedness is Swatasiddha. This is the topic that we are going to be discussing in more detail on the Saturday morning class. I am Swatasiddha. I don't have to observe myself to say, am I an unlimited person? Because I am the unlimited person. All I have to do is to suspend the faulty conclusion that I'm a limited person. And if I look at the faultiness of it, I'm already an unlimited person. So this way, my analysis of my experiences can lead me to the right, it's a door to the right vision. So this is what is called Dwara Bhutam. So he says, Vishayananda, we can even read that sentence. Verse number 1 of the chapter 15th. Because the first verse of the chapter kind of gives it away as to what it is. So he says, Atha atra Vishayanandaha Brahmananda Amsharupa Bhak. So this is the first logical point made by this verse, that in this topic of that we are studying, which is Vishayananda, we should see that it is just a Brahmananda Amshaha. It is an aspect. You cannot say it is a part. You cannot say it's a part. The object, supposing there's an English translation of Amsha. Amsha could be mean part. It is not a part. Like a wave is not a part of the ocean. It's not like a brick of a house. It is simply another, you can say it is another aspect of it. It's an individualistic aspect of the whole ocean. So, Brahmananda Amsha Rupa Bhak. It means it deserves the definition that it is an aspect of Brahmananda. What deserves? Vishayananda deserves being called as an aspect of Brahmananda. This is the first line. Then he says, Nirupyate dvarabhutaha tad amshatvam shruti jagao. So shruti jagao means Shruti teaches, shows. Upadishyate, nirupyate. Nirupyate means it very clearly delineates. It says it. As we will see on the rest of when we start doing the other verses, it is not a model. Not a model. I mean, the energy used to use the word system. He says that Advaita Vedanta is not a system. It is not a model. What do you mean by that? You know, models and systems are a speculation. This is why I am telling you, I have listened to Swami Dayananji so long that I do not call Vedanta as a philosophy. A lot of teachers casually translate Vedanta as a philosophy. Swami Dayananji, who was not only a scholar of Vedanta, he was a scholar of communication, of how to teach, not only what to teach. And he would made it very clear, please be careful in using words that are appropriate to the subject matter. I remember this so well. Swamiji said that when he came to the US, and he says, this I found peculiar to the people grown up in this country. And even if there are Indians, Westerners, whatever it is, so he was talking about Indians in this country, children born here. So Swami Dayananda used to say, you know, when I go to satsang, you know what happens? Because after the satsang, the host has a basket full of fruits that he gives to Swamiji, and then people will come and bow before him, and he would give them a prasada. And of course, Swamiji was so fond of doing this. He was a sports person when he was growing up. So he was always wanted to be a sports person. So what he would do is, he would not only give it to the person who's bowing before him, like a apple or an orange or a banana, he would throw it to them. And this became a big sport, that you have to catch his throw. And so people would be there all the way to the corner of the room and say, Swamiji, okay, I'm here. Swamiji would say, okay, good. Once in a while they will drop it, but most of the time people will catch it. Anyway, so when Swamiji first started to come, children would come to him and say, he would ask some child, because there might be some banana, so he will tell the person, here's a banana. And he says, I heard the children sometimes say, I hate a banana. Swamiji said, this was absolutely a shock to me. That in all of his experiences in India, children do not use the word hate, let alone for a banana. They don't even use it for a person, let alone for a little pleasant yellow fruit called banana. So he says that the parents have to really teach their children that you have to use words carefully. Remember that this is a more recent example. This is an actual example somebody gave me. So I think I've already told you this, just on the topic of the appropriateness of the language. So there was a brother and sister, a brother and a girl who was an older girl, and a younger boy. Okay, And so they were bugging their mom. Mom, we are hungry. Please, when is dinner coming? Because we are tired. We need to get something to eat. So this young boy said to his mother, Mom, I'm starving. This is an actual case. There's a 9-year-old, maybe an 8-year-old sister of this young boy. And he said, I don't know, whatever his name was, he says, hey, youngster, you don't use the word starving for what you are. Say you are hungry. You know what starving is? Have you seen pictures of people in India and Pakistan and Bangladesh who's got their ribs showing, and they have no flesh on their, and they haven't had any eat. This young girl was telling him, he says, that is starving. You are not starving. You are simply hungry. Beautiful. So Swamiji used to say, please use the right words. And one of the things he would say is, Vedanta is not a philosophy. It is not a system. I would even extend that to by another word. This is not a model. Not a model. I'll repeat this when we actually are doing some verses. Why not? Because philosophy means speculation. This is my belief. This is the way I think it should be. This isn't the way it is. This is the truth. Not a philosophy. This is the way things are. And the way things are that I don't see. That's a different matter altogether. It is not like saying, my philosophy is this. What is your philosophy? It's not like that. There is some revelation of truth from the very Creator. He says this is the way things are. And if you say, well, I don't understand it, that's okay. But don't say this is my philosophy. Either you understand it or you don't. So anyway, so nirupyate, that was the word I was going off on. Nirupyate means it presents, it defines, it reveals, those kinds of translations. Nirupyate tad amshatvam. Tad amshatvam means that aspect of Brahmananda in the form of Vishayananda. This is called amshatvam. This is the aspectness of Vishayananda, which becomes, it is not just an idle aspect of it, dvarabhutam. It's such an aspect. It reveals the Vishayananda, which is an aspect of Brahmananda, in such a way that it opens up the door to a complete understanding of Brahmananda. This is what the first verse says. We've already done that in last week, so I just expanded that whole thing. Okay. So now I think I mentioned it to you that this is somewhat of a straightforward, simple exposition in the 15th chapter. So it is kind of like divided into two parts. So the first part is means the first half of the 15th chapter, the first half of up to the verse 16th. It tells us examples on how these two important concepts already given in the first verse are are to be understood. What are the two concepts? Just think about the two concepts in your mind for just a second. First one is that Vishayananda is an aspect of Brahmananda. The second concept is that if properly understood, the aspect of the Vishayananda becomes a method to understand Brahmananda. These are the two things. This is given in the rest of the verses from number 2 to 16, which reinforces, clarifies, confirms this fact. Then, and so this it is done in the method of, as you will see now, it's done in the method of when you have problems in your life. There is a certain gradation of the problem which can be seen to be a hiding of the Brahmananda based on the various problems. So this is an enumeration of the problems in your life. Then the second part of it would be the removal of the problems. As you remove the coverings, so to speak. So the first half is the covering of the Brahmananda, and the second half is as you remove the covering, you will now confirm that this is working. What is working? The thesis that it is a amsha of the Brahmananda, and it is in fact a dwarabhutam. So that second aspect of that, one will be showing you how the multiple coverings hide it, and the second one will be how removing the covers reveals it. So both of them together, it's like two sides of the same coin, confirms that Vishayananda is nothing but an amsha of the Brahmananda. So this is the general methodology. I think we can go rather quickly, and I won't go through verse by verse. I may just, I've given you the conceptual structure of the 15th verse, and now I will point out a bit more detail about this. Okay, so let's do that. So number 2, verse number 2. Verse number 2 says, I won't, I'm just reading it on myself. Eshaha asya paramanandaha yaha akhanda eka rasatmakaha anyani bhutani etasya matra eva bunjate. So there it says, let's see how the human, so here the human being is being analyzed, how the human being covers up the light within, its own light, our own ananda. How we ourselves cover it, and how the methodology is to be used in the covering of it. So first it says you should know that there are 4 aspects of your mind. We all know that. It is manaha, then buddhihi, then chittaha, memory, and the 4th one is ahankara. These are the 4 aspects of the so-called mind. So in here we saw that the manaha is the one that potentially gets us into problems by its uncertainty of not clear thinking. So this is kind of like covering. Then you have buddhi, which actually keeps us going in the right direction, makes intelligent decisions, keeps the manaha under control. It could. It doesn't have to. If the buddhi itself also is defective, then God help us. But the buddhi is given as a faculty where it can distinguish right for wrong. Like, supposing somebody insults you publicly. You're going to some get together, and in the front of everybody else, somebody insults you publicly. Your first reaction is to get so upset by that you feel like telling the person, "Shut up! How dare you insult me like this?" So this job is done by your manaha, because the manaha also is very logical. It says this person has no business insulting you in the middle of your family and friends. How could he do that? Aren't you going to get back to him? So the manaha says, do it, or react to it. Then if your buddhi has been sharpened over the years with a lot of discipline and so on, the buddhi will advise to you, this is his problem. Insulting people is his problem, not yours. Why do you take yourself to be insulted? Rise above it and just smile and say, well, if you think that, it's okay, it's up to you. Whatever, just say some, and everybody would say, wow, that person took the insult and was not reacting to it. So this is done by buddhi. Then comes chittam, and so the chittam which we have, I remember this is how when you first learn Vedanta, you're given the very basics. So the basics given to me was, I remember we had I don't know how, yes, this is really remarkable. When I first met Swami Chinmayananji, so there was what is called a lesson course. I don't know if you've ever seen that or not. Just like Swami Dayanandji had a Gita home study, which was much more elaborate, but Swami Chinmayananda used to have a lesson course. And this was composed by one of his shishyas called Parthasarthi. I remember that name. This is back in 1973. And so when we met Swami Chinmayananji, and of course he gave, some Gita yajnas after 1 week, he was gone. So the question was, what do we study afterwards? And so we formed a study group, and we followed what is called the lesson course. So in the lesson course, which is kind of like Tattva Bodha, and so it had all the elements of Vedanta, and so we would study it, and we would have a study group and all of that. And there it was said, you have manaha, buddhi, then you have chittam and ahankara. And so the chittam was a memory. So it was told that, don't you see that you have manaha, like a reacting mind. You have a buddhi, which is more wisdom, wise mind. And then you have memory. And then you have ahankara, this is me. So we all said, yeah, this makes a lot of sense. Later on, this point about chittam was expanded by the Mahatmas to say that this is what is called samskaras, or you can say this is vasanas, or you can say it is prarabdha. So it is not just pure memory, but the whole flow of your thoughts that determines your life is what is called chittam. That made more sense. And so here, as we have already discussed it many, many times, that there are now two ways of looking at your mental flow of things, vasanas. You can call it samskaras, you can call it prarabdha. There are two ways of looking at it. One is where it is shaped by your past and your present and your influences, which is worldly influences. Most importantly, the worldly influences of your mom and dad. See, this is the thing. Our mom and dad influence us more than anyone else. Like, for example, this was, you can call it a slow start. My dad was very interested that, like in most of our dads, mine is not peculiar to that. I'm just telling you that in our case, our mothers and fathers were interested that we become successful, we become good citizens, that we work hard to adopt a profession which will bring money, joy to the family. This is the samskaras that they gave us. Okay, and then you find people whose samskaras are, their mother and father are deeply spiritual from the very beginning, and they want their children to be even more spiritual than they are, and they shape their lives accordingly. In fact, in this same book that I'm taking a couple of chapters on the Saturday morning, called Sadhana or Brahma Anubhuti, there is a chapter on Brahmacharya. But Brahmacharya normally means celibacy, non-sexuality. That's what Brahmacharya means. But Swami Akhandananda has given a very detailed outline to the parents who want their children to be ready for becoming a Mahatma. And there are parents like that. If you go to India, I would say that there are millions of parents who are, I don't know millions, but some very large number, who are extremely spiritual. And they don't care if their children are successful or not, but they are good people and they are schooled in the right way. So Swamiji has a whole chapter called Brahmacharya, where he talks about even the mother at conception, as soon as she becomes pregnant, what to do and what to say, what to behave, what to eat, so that your chances of becoming your progeny as a highly spiritual person gets enhanced. And then after the birth, what do you have to do? Pujas, and so on and so forth. So anyway, this can happen. And many of us have high aims, but because of our inability to follow through, we just let go and say, it's okay. Bhagwan will take care of the children. Let them go to school, learn. It was really so funny. This was in 20. Yeah, in fact, I remember this so well. This is the same Guru Bhai reunion in 2001 or 2. I have to ascertain the dates. I'm mixed up between one of the two dates. When Swami Dayanandji had a big Guru Bhai union in Coimbatore. And I was invited to that. This is where I talked to Swami Paramarthananda. And I was so deeply impressed by, the teaching, the depth, the whole lifestyle in Manjukudi and in Coimbatore and so on, that I still remember this. So I was, I visited my niece, my sister's older daughter, Preeti, in Bangalore. So she was working, she and her husband were living and working in Bangalore. And Preeti had a young daughter, Mansi, still there. She's in India. And she was like 4 or 5 years old. So I was telling Preeti, I said, Preeti, you know what I would do if I had to do it over again? I would send the children to a Vedic school where you learn the truth about what is going on. Give them that instruction that early. She was very polite to me. And I must have brought it up a couple of times during my short stay with her. Finally, she said, Vijay Mama, this is not going to happen. I said, why not? Why can't we do that? She says, Vijay Mama, you have no idea the state of the Vedic schools, where they are, how far they have to go, where they would live. They are not many, and I don't know where they are. How am I going to send it to some small villages outside? He says, look at it. You look at all the Christian schools, they have the best locations in Bangalore. And yes, they have to show them a little bit about Christ. And so she says, I don't mind. At least she's getting quality education in discipline and languages and math and all that. I had to keep my mouth shut. And she's right. How is she going to send it to some Vedic school and so on? So anyway, Swami Akhandananda ji has a complete chapter of brahmacharya, of right from conception, then sending them to gurukulams and so on. In the old days, there were no city life as such. Nowadays, you cannot really do that anyway. Whether you do that or not, what happens is that for some of us, we knock around in our lives and we go through a lot of issues. We have jobs, marriages, children, this, that, or the other. But the inner desire to have something which is deeper is still there, bubbling underneath the surface, so to speak. And one day it bursts open. And when it does, we try to do as much as possible, but in some ways it is pretty late in the game. Well, anyway, so the whole samskaras, the chittam and so on, that covers the Brahmananda is one set of thoughts which is laukika, which is worldly. Becoming a doctor, becoming an engineer, marrying, buying homes, cars, and getting involved with politics, having friends, having kitty parties when you're approaching retirement, all those kinds of things. This is what is called laukika. This is the worldly vasanas. And the result of that is you end up at the end of the life not having accomplished anything really seriously. At the very most, you might have improved your chances in your next life. That's about all that can happen. Then you have the other one, which is a complete package There are two packages. One is the Laukika package, the other one is Shastra-janya package, the one which is born out of Shastra. So there, whether you do it early or late doesn't matter, but once you do that, you now have to choose. They're almost like two directions to go. But if you choose this, it's a complete package. What do you need to do? What are the difficulties? And so this is what we are studying. What are the difficulties? How does your life cover your own joy that you have? How does it cover so that you don't understand it? What is the covering? At least you try to understand in that. Hopefully by the end of this life, you would have figured it all out and you are actually now well on your way to do that. So these are the two directions that we have to go through. Okay, anyway, so that is that. And then you have the ahankara, the fourth one. So now, in the next verse, number 3, the 3 basic kinds of the thoughts of the mind are given, nirupyate. One is called shanta vritti, one is called ghora vritti, and the third one is called mudha vritti. Shanta, ghora, and mudha. And so the shanta is sattvic. So the sattvic, of course, is the state of the mind. But here we are talking about shanta vritti, means it's the flow of sattvic thoughts, the whole flow. The methodology of tackling problems through shanta vritti, the whole flow is talked about, not just a single quality. Similarly, ghora vritti, which is rajasic, rajas, it has its own flow, is talked about. And then you have the mudha vritti. And the mudha vritti is the one where you do not get it, you don't understand. Even if somebody tries to tell you this is the right way, you either don't understand it or you don't agree with it. And you say, I am just going to do what I want to do, don't tell me. And I refuse to do it, I'm incapable of doing it, I'm not interested in it. Let me be. So now becomes a series of verses that explain how the and of course for each one of us we are not purely shanta, ghora or mudha. We are a mixture in our stages of life, mixture in the stages of a day. We may have shanta vritti in the morning, we may have a ghora vritti and mudha vritti during the day. But I think the interplay of these things we should understand how the coverings are. And this is what is talked about in the Bhagavad Gita also. So it's not something new, but the way it is presented here in a very structured manner shows that I have to really look at to see how I end up covering my own ananda. That's the topic. Okay. So here, one brief thing that is taken up in more detail, given in verse number 5, is that, as you know, the Atma, Brahman, has 3 aspects to it. So one is Jnanam. One aspect is that it is the nature of presence, isness. It is there. It is not there. It is there. And what is there has two other aspects. One of them is jnanam, awareness, knowledge. And the other one is sukham, ananda. So each one of us in the whole world is the nature of Brahmananda. Brahmananda means Chit Swarupaha, Jnana Swarupaha, Sat Swarupaha, and Ananda Swarupaha. All three of them are there. But the way we cover it distinguishes a person from another. So here it is said that both the Mudha and the Ghora Vritti reflects Jnanam but not Sukham. But Shanta Vritti reflects both Jnanam and Sukham. So it is something like, supposing you reflect light or fire in a body of water. So supposing you have a pail of water and the sunlight falls on the water. So what happens is that the water reflects the light of the sun but absorbs the heat of the sun, because the water does not get heated easily. You have to spend a lot of time doing it. So if you just have a sun that is just reflecting on the water, it absorbs one of the aspects but reflects the other. But supposing you have a dry piece of wood, there the wood not only reflects the light to a large extent, but also reflects the heat of it. It's not a perfect example, but this is one aspect of it. So similarly here also, another given later on is that suppose you have a moon reflecting on water. If the water is very dirty, then it would not reflect the moon at all. You cannot even see the reflection of the moon in a dirty water. If you, I remember when my father used to work in Bengal, and I also spent a lot of time in both Bengal and Bihar, and especially in Bengal, they would have a lot of village ponds. If we go on a drive, we never lived in a village, but we would visit villages sometimes in our drives, and they would have a little pond, and the pond would be so still and not cleaned properly that it has some kind of a green film on top of that. And we could even see that if somebody wants to take a bath in it, they push away this green stuff away from it, some kind of algae or I don't know what it was. And then they would take a bath in it, and then the algae will go back and cover it again. So if the water is like that, or supposing it is very dirty, then it would not reflect the moon. Or if the water is very choppy, like that of not in some pond, but in the ocean, there also the moon will not be reflected. But if the water is clean and it is still, it can reflect the moon very clearly. So the point of these examples is that the same Atma, when it is covered by a Rajasika vritti. Rajasa vritti means full of desires, full of things to do, and it is not still. It has a lot of kamana, trishna. So there is a difference in all this is from these verses from. So I'm just sort of playing back and forth. So there's a difference between kamana and trishna. So Swami Maheshananji says that kamana is whatever you desired, you got it. And you feel this is what I was looking for and I got it and I'm happy. So this is called kamana nivritti. So there is a difference between kamana and trishna. Trishna means not only a desire, but a greedy desire is called trishna. And the aspect of the trishna is whatever I desired, I got. I wish I had done more for it. I wish I could have gotten more. And next time I will do more. That is called trishna. You know, it's interesting. Many of you may know that this NVIDIA stock is doing well because of AI. It has some chip that is very conducive for artificial intelligence, and it's doing very well. And so I have bought and sold NVIDIA over time. Wish I had kept it. See, that is a trishna. I have actually made some decent returns from NVIDIA. But my thought was, why didn't I buy more? This is part of the trishna. And of course, in my life, I'm able to deal with those things. It doesn't bother me. This is the way things are. You make some money, you lose some money, and you go on. It doesn't let me bother me. But at one time, perhaps my trishna would have gotten hold of me. So, in the Rajasaka vritti, you cover your own happiness by looking outwards with some desires. So in that case, what happens is, just look at it this. When you have a desiring state of mind, that also reflects Brahmananda. Also reflects Brahmananda. But it reflects Brahmananda in such a way that it does not reflect the Ananda. It only reflects the Chit and Sat. Brahmananda is still there. But what you are looking at is the state of your mind to determine who you are. And that state of the mind partially reflects the Brahmananda and absorbs the Ananda. Because you're so outwardly bound in terms of desires. On the other hand, if it is sattva guna pradhana, this is called shanta vritti. If you have shanta vritti, then in addition to reflecting the sat and the chit, it also reflects the ananda. So one should analyze one's state of the life, how my own ananda is obstructed or revealed. It is covered up or uncovered up by my own thoughts. And so these are the variations. So you, for example, suppose you desire something. So this is all in verses up to 12, 13. We're almost, I'm just giving you a full, we'll have a little bit more in the next class, but I think we're pretty much covered how you cover up your own ananda. So for example, in the shanta vritti, you're happy. There are some desires, normal desires of life, not binding desires, but normal desires, especially for things that are given to us by Ishvara, like hunger and good health and all those kinds of things. So if you fulfill it, you feel good. And that fulfillment simply reflects your own ananda. But if your desires are not fulfilled, then you have a varying degree of covering on the ananda. One of them could be you are irritated, how come you are not successful? So this is one level. A more intense level is you are really upset. And not only that, you express it with your own anger, blaming certain situations for preventing you from filling. All those are coverings of your own ananda. It's kind of like, if you have a thin level of clouds, you can almost see the sun. Not clearly, but you can see it. But if the clouds become thicker, then the sun is obstructed. And if the clouds are still thicker, so dark, it looks like it doesn't even look like a day. It looks like an evening. Complete obstruction of the sun. So here, Sri Vidyaranya says, please examine the process by which you dig your own hole, so to speak, by covering your own ananda with the type of mind, the type of attitude, the type of reactions, disappointments that you do. And become joyful. Become joyful that this is an interesting game. How am I obstructing my own ananda? Why should I do it? Do I doubt my own ananda? It must be. Clarify it. See, this is your own self. So in doing that, as we were doing about the limited being and the unlimited being, if you see that this is your own ananda, then it becomes a very interesting game in life. that you find that if your mind reacts in a certain way, you say, why are you doing that? If my nature is Ananda, why am I seeking it outside? It's a kind of dialogue that you have to play. You have to confront, persuade. All of that has to happen. But all because, and I can now bring in that thought that I had given you earlier, that this is not a philosophy. This is not a model. So really speaking, most of the explanation of what gives happiness in one's life is a philosophy. It's a model. Some of it has good points, some of them don't have a good point. All speculative. This is not a model. It's not a speculation, not a philosophy. This is what Swami Dayanandji used to point out. All the acharyas say that. This is a fact. See this leela of the Ishvara. This is how I hide myself. And if you are up for the game, then you find that even problems become joyful, because you'll say, aha, this is how the problems used to come. When I didn't know that I had my own Ananda, now that I know, the problems are still occurring, but this is what the mithyatvam of the problems becomes more apparent. So this is the analysis of what is called Vishayananda. So you see now you can see the importance and the method used in understanding that your own life, which was individual dots, you have to connect it and see a pattern and follow not the philosophy of Shastra, but the truth of Shastra, which is you. Observe it, enjoy it. And see the structure behind it. So and so here also in some of the verses, what we had talked about in the 14th chapter also can be incorporated in terms of the four methods of how Ananda manifests itself, which is Priyam, then Moda, then Pramoda, and then finally Ananda. So you can incorporate that also. It is all consistent with this methodology. So that brings us to the one half of the chapter, up to verse number 16. And so I think what we will do is, in the next class, we will very quickly revise this, so that just as a reminder of the structure. And then we will go to the second half of the chapter, which will be kind of like as you remove the coverings, how your own Ananda becomes more visible to you, so to speak. Just like if you clean the pond water, how your reflection becomes very clear in it. So there we can take a reflection not of the moon, but your own self. So that would be constituting the second part of the verse of chapter 15. So it is very possible, I'll have to look at it, very possible that this may be, next week may be the last class. We'll have to see. Or maybe we'll have one more class. So I think a maximum of 2 classes for this Paancadasi, chapter 11 through 15. And then we would wrap it up and perhaps go into some other topics, some other texts. Okay, so with that, let me close the class. Om Asatoma Satkamaya Tamasoma Jyotirgamaya Mrityorma Amritam Gamaya Om Purnamadav Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnamevavashishyate Om Shanti 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 Harihi Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha Harihi Om. So Amit's question is there any significance to the order in which Swami Vidyaranya has presented Yogananda, Atmananda, Advaitananda, Vidyananda, and Vishayananda? So as I think we have gone through this to a certain extent. Yes, there is some structure to it. What was said was that for people who are relatively well advanced in their life in terms of the appreciation of the yogic principles, the Vedantic principles, then you should straight away obtain this ananda through the structured way of yoga. So the yoga here would mean the nididhyasanam, not the Patanjali yoga, although they are similar. But nididhyasanam, as we talked about the structure, the 15 steps in the Saturday classes, so something like that. So that would be the Yogananda. So this is preferable. You don't need to really go through any other analysis, but this would be the way to do that. Then comes Atmananda, where it says that what if I am unable to have a lifestyle where I can really practice the Yogananda given in number chapter 11? What do I do then? So there it was saying that you have to add viveka to your methodology. And what do you mean by viveka? As you saw, the classical point of viveka was that we we fool ourselves in many ways on externalizing our attitudes, when in fact I should see that I am looking for something which is already me. And so, as the Brihadaranyaka says, that Sir Yajnavalkya was telling his wife that, listen, you think that people love others, but really speaking, they are loving themselves, and the loving of others is simply an expression of that. And we went through all the... so there, the Atmananda was that please see that everything is nothing but Atmananda alone. And you're making a small mistake. And you are pretending and you are fooling everybody that I love you, I love you. In fact, the fact of the matter is that when you say I love you, that means that you are not obstructing my Shanta Vritti. Thank you for not disturbing my Shanta Vritti. So this was called Atmananda. Okay? Then the Advaitananda was a completion of both Yogananda and Atmananda, because both Yogananda and Atmananda were Dvaita-based Ananda. That I am just I'm a yogi, I'm just meditating here. And it's good that I don't see the world through my meditation. They're all silent. Nothing disturbs me. But they haven't disappeared. So the resolution of the Dvaita still needs to be done. Similarly, in the case of Atmananda, how do you do that? So really the completion of the thought of everything is nothing but me alone is done through Advaitananda. Then the Vidyananda was to observe. So all these are really, it's not as though it's a straight ladder. It's a jigsaw puzzle all mixed together. So really speaking, we have to look at certain aspects of my life as Yogananda, some aspects as Atmananda, some as Advaitananda. Then the Vidyananda was to observe that my thoughts in my mind of the Atma that I don't see clearly, but the very thoughts in my mind can give me pleasure. Excuse me. So that also is nothing but the thoughts in your mind is also nothing but an expression of the Atma. The example given there was that deep sleep is your desired objective because it is you become one with Brahman. But the very thought of going to sleep and making your own bed, you haven't gone to sleep yet, is also very pleasant. And we also saw that the very things don't have to happen, but the very thought of something can also create that. Recently I just had the opposite reaction to that. So one of my wife's sister-in-law, her younger brother's wife, just happened last week. She was going on the back of a motorcycle to her parents' home from where she lives in, and the motorcycle had an accident, and she fell and bruised her whole body, and she did not break any bones. But my wife was talking to her on the phone about the bruising of her body as she fell, and I was listening to it, and do you know what? I felt that my body was getting bruised. You just imagine that somebody's body is getting scraped on the concrete or the road, and just the thought of it really creates the feeling of dukkha. And so both positive and negative, this is what was called Vidyananda. That the very thought of Ananda, if you pursue it, and this is what they say, that if you do bhajans, we just did the Ramastuti by Swami Viditatmananda ji. Just singing the bhajan itself, your desires have not been fulfilled, you are still the same person, but the very thought of the Ananda, this is the nature of Rama and Krishna, that just if you understand their reality, they are you. They are not Ananda separate from you. So this was called Vidyananda. And then what we are doing now is that in Vishayananda, if my prarabdha is not anukula, it is full of problems, then how do I deal with it? How do I keep my focus on the Brahmananda? And you do it by recognizing the interplay of how you're hiding your own Ananda through your own mind and how you uncover it. So, this is not like one leading to the other. It's not that. It's a jigsaw puzzle where various aspects of your mind are clarified and they all fit together. And the overall effect is, yes, this is what I need to do. This is what I am. This is what my nature is. This is what's keeping me from understanding. So it's something like that, was I would say, must be there in the mind of Swami Vidyaranya as he formulated the sequence of these chapters. Hope it's clear. Okay. All right. Well, good to see you all, and hopefully we'll see you next week. Hari Om.